organized the vice lords in St. Charles in 1957, but they came home before him in 58. And when they came home, they went to their prospective street gangs that they came from, you know, and recruited them to become vice lords.
So you say he started it in St. Charles at 57. They hit the streets in 58?
Right, yeah.
Okay. So would you consider yourself second generation vice lord?
Yeah, we were like second generation because they started in 57. We became vice lords in 67, okay. 10 years later.
Okay, okay. All right, so once that meeting took place, right, what was the, you know, how was the vice lords moving after that meeting?
Well, after that, there was a lot of meetings on Cicero. Like they would have meetings at the Keeman's Club. The Keeman's Club was well known on the west side. They had a bowling alley in there, a lot of banquet halls, and a lot of people would do like banquet dinners, that type of stuff in there, parties and stuff like that. And they would have community meetings in there, educating the community on what they was trying to do for the community and stuff. You know, then they had negotiated with the Resurrection School because it had a big basement, and that became a skating ring for us. So it was doing things, providing alternatives for us young guys. You know, they even did some negotiating with Columbus Park, where we was traveling to go to school, swimming at and stuff, you know. And the Bird Show was in the 4700 block on Madison. You know, then you had Keeman's Club right there. So that's what I noticed, that the older vice lords was moving, having community meetings, educating our parents. I remember my mother would go to some of those meetings, talking about schools and conditions and stuff, because it was around in 68 when Martin Luther King got assassinated. We were like the largest group of blacks to graduate out the 8th grade to go to Austin High School, which is in a predominant white community, right? And so we had to travel through this white community to get to Austin High School, and we had to deal with being attacked and all that. And so the vice lord would kind of escort us through the community and then come up there and escort us back out the community. And I remember a conflict happened one time where they took Willie Lord, Bobby Gore, and I think Caveman's, you know, the other vice lords, to jail for that, right? And I remember Peabody at that time had became the chief of the Cicero vice lord because Slim had got killed the year before, and so Peabody was the chief. And I remember him having a meeting right on Cicero and Gladys at Highway Beef right there. And we heard about the meeting when we came up there. And so then you had vice lords from 16th Street, the Congress Street lords, the Albany vice lords, they all was meeting there, and we marched up to the police station, right? And Bobby, no, not Bobby, but I think it was Alfonso and them, and forget this other guy named, he was a high-ranking member. They went in there with lawyers to challenge them, to charge them or let her go, right? And they ended up bringing them out the police station. So then we started marching back to Cicero, right? And they gave us strict orders: don't walk on these people's grass, all that stuff. When you finish your candy bar, chips or whatever, put in your pocket. We don't want to give these people no reason to complain while we was walking through their community, you know. I think in retrospect, they learned that when they marched earlier with Martin Luther King in Cicero, because they marched with Martin Luther King in, I think in 67, or yeah, earlier in Cicero, because King got killed in April 4th, 1968. So that was like a peaceful thing to go challenge the police to let Bobby Gore and them go, and they had lawyers in there. Because like I say, by that time, they became conservative vice lord and corporation. So they had a board of directors, they had community leaders, because I think it was August 27th, 1967, they had a conference where the Vice Lords, the Egyptian Cobras, and the Roman Saints, they were like the three major street gangs on the west side of the town. And they had a conference inviting all those businesses, like Marshall Fields, Kraft's Food, Sears and Roebuck, Western Electric, and they brought Bell Telephone Company, they brought all those companies together and the legislators and appealed to them what they was trying to do to reduce the violence and provide alternative for the youth. And so out of that conference, they all agreed to give those street gangs support letters so they can get grants.
Hold on, you say the Vice Lords brought all them together, right?
Well, they met. First, there was a truce between the Vice Lord, the Egyptian Cobras, and the Roman Saints. When the Vice Lord declared they was conservative Vice Lord and corporation, and they wanted to be a self-help group to do for self, then they started having these truce, meeting with the Egyptian Cobras, and they bought in like, yeah, we do got to shut this down, because the old Egyptian Cobras, like Bobby and them, they had got older, they was in their 20s, and they wanted to calm these young guys down from that BS they was in. And so they met with the Roman Saints too. And so once they started having those meetings, right, doing something like ceasefire, so to speak, right, peacekeeping type stuff, then that's when they met with the two commanders because Lawndale had two precincts, the 10th and 11th district. So they met with the two commanders and appealed to them what they was trying to do, because the commanders knew who they were, and so the commanders them supported them and organized this summit at Sears and Roebuck was right on Arlington and Homan. And across the street they had a big administrative building with conference room and stuff, and that's where they had the meeting at the conference down there. And that's when all these businesses met with them, and they had a proposal. Matter of fact, I got a copy of the minutes from that actual meeting, with all the people that was present. And so, like I say, Bell Telephone Company, Marshall Fields, Sears and Roebuck, all them companies, Western Electric, they agreed from that summit that they would give them support letters, not just the Vice Lord, but the Egyptian Cobras as well as the Roman Saints as well, right? And so out of that, Vice Lord them got a grant, but because President Nixon had passed a bill that if you didn't have a 501c3, meaning you tax exempt, you couldn't qualify for federal grants. And so you had to get a fiscal agent, somebody that already had a 501c3. So Sears and Roebuck became the Vice Lord's fiscal agent. And at that time, that's where Pep and them normally hung out at Sears YMCA, right on Arlington and Kedzie. Right now it's a work release center, but that used to be Sears YMCA. And Sears and Roebuck, the store was right on Arlington and Homan. And like I said, in the middle, they had a big warehouse and a lot of that stuff. And that's how that started, and it was bringing down a lot of the violence on the west side. And they saw that it was working, that truce, because the Egyptian Cobras and the Vice Lords are arch enemies, right? And then you had the Roman Saints, right? And the Imperial Chaplain, that's who rejected Pepperlo when he tried to become Imperial Chaplain. Big John didn't like Pep. And Black Wren and Leonard Calloway were Imperial Chaplains. And so they ended up in St. Charles with Pepperlo, right? And Pep ran St. Charles, because Pep was like 6'3", cut, muscle, knockout artist. He was knocking guards out, right? So he ran St. Charles, and he would determine who worked and where in St. Charles. So he organized the Vice Lords in St. Charles in 1957. But they came home before him in 58. And when they came home, they went to their prospective street gangs that they came from, and recruited them to become Vice Lords. So when Pep hit the streets, he had about 40 Vice Lords. And his whole thing was his vengeance against Big John, who rejected him when he was Imperial Chaplain. That was his main thing, right? Matter of fact, the story go like this. One of the Imperial Chaplains smacked Pep's sister at the Central Park Theater. Pep escaped from St. Charles, went up there, asked his sister which hand did he slap her with, and she said his left hand. And Pep went to cut his motherfucking hand off, and they stopped. That's how ruthless Pep was, man. Right? And a lot of them guys knew, because Pep got sent to, back then, at 17, you go to county jail. And remember, they was telling this guy he supposed to have been a gangster, right? He was in the house of correction with them, ordering people around. Pep young, 17, right? And he working in the kitchen, and this guy come through the line, and Pep give him his ration like he supposed to, and Pep said, "No, move on, man," right? And the guy kind of bristled up at Pep. Pep like, "What?" And they trying to tell Pep, "Man, be cool, man. You don't know it, man. Fuck that. I'm Pepperlo," right? And the dude tried to dominate Pep after they come out the kitchen. Pep beat his ass, right? And that's when Pep name got the ringing all through that jail. And he, motherfucker, we vice lords up in here. And they just took over the house of correction, man. So that's how Pep was, man. Pep wasn't about trying to be no community organization, none of that shit. He was straight up dismantling every motherfucker guy. He didn't believe in uniting with vice lords. You go either be vice lords or not. And that's how Bobby Gore, who was a Clover, became a vice lord, because Pep was dismantling every little group in there. Vice lord or move around. That's how Pep was.
Hold on, so you say Bobby was a Clover at first, right?
Yeah, Bobby Gore was a Clover.
Right,
he didn't become a vice lord until 1966.
Okay.
But Bobby was always a student of Marcus Garvey and a follower of Elijah Muhammad. So when he became a vice lord, he came with that idea of self-help. And by this time, Pepperlo had stepped down, and Alfonso Alfred became the chief. And so when they started moving as a non-for-profit, well, they hadn't became a non-for-profit yet, but they was trying to, like my generation, they was trying to get us engaged in like BBR, Better Boys Foundation, organizations like that. But them organizations was rejecting our generation because they felt they couldn't get no success out of us because we was gangbangers, right? And so that's when Bobby said we need to become a self-help group. Okay. And that's when they started going after grants and meeting and causing truce with the Egyptian Cobras and the Roman Saints, and they started organizing like that.
Okay, yeah. So I want to take it back to the Imperial Chaplains, right? So would you say that's what made Pep start vice lords, because he was rejected by the chaplains?
Well, back then, you got to look at the history. In the late 40s and early 50s, young Italian gangs ran St. Charles, and Irish gangs, and Polish gangs, those white gangs. And they would intimidate and dominate young blacks that was coming in IYC, because they was a minority. And as time went on, the young black guys in IYC started banding together, fighting the Irish and Italian gangs in St. Charles. By the time Pep got there, right, there was a lot of young black guys from that west side, from all smaller gangs. And Pep, just being who he was, stood out, right? And the administration knew this young boy here, he's a thinker, he's a leader, they followed him. So to appease him, he became like the guy who worked in the laundry, who worked in the commissary, to appease him. And then having that kind of authority, he started calling meetings with guys, and Black Wren and Leonard Calloway, who was a imperial chaplain, who was trying to get Big John to let Pep become an imperial chaplain, they was there. And so Pep came up with this idea of them organizing and going back and just taking it over. That was his idea, right? Now, when Pep was about 10 or 11, he was living down by the village. Him and Bobby Gore both come from the village before blacks was moving to Lawndale. And you had some vice lords back there then. It was they were like a club, about 10 guys. And Bobby was an artist, so they would have Bobby draw vice lords on the back of their leather jackets, right? And so they disbanded, because they were like a little club. Some of them went to the Vietnam War, some of them got married. They just disbanded, they didn't go no far. So Pep remembered that, and so he reenacted that name, Vice Lord, because he said they didn't want to be the mafia syndicate. They just wanted to be vice lord, the ruler of all the vices and the lords of it. And that's how he came up with that concept, vice lord. But he got the name from when he was 10, 11 years old.
Oh, so another club already had that name prior to Pep. Okay.
Yeah.
Wait, you remember what year that was?
That had to be like in 1953, 54, something like that. Because he ended up in St. Charles in 57. Yeah.
Okay, okay. You say Pep, he went for no talking, straight
No,
business.
Pep was a nonsense. He didn't believe in that. We're going to unite with y'all. No, y'all going to be vice lords and y'all getting the fuck out the way. That's who Pep was. Shit.
So would you give Bobby the credit for bringing the consciousness to the vice lord?
Yeah, because when the Clover disbanded and a lot of them became vice lords, Bobby came with a consciousness. You know, and his whole thing was we got to do for self instead of begging people to do, but we got to create our own. And so the white guy, David Dawley, he was in Lawndale with a grant to do a survey of street gangs on the west side of Chicago. And so he ran into Pepperlo. Pep wasn't with that. He introduced him to Bobby Gore. He said, man, you might want to talk to him. That's when he introduced him to Bobby Gore. He explained what he was doing. He got some money to hire guys to do these surveys and stuff. So he started hiring vice lords to do these surveys and stuff. And Bobby warned him that if he was an informant or something like that, he ain't coming out of Lawndale alive. He got to be on the up and up. But David Dawley assured them that he was on the up and up. And so David Dawley knew and saw how they was moving and trying to get organized and declared that they no longer, because they had called a press conference and declared that they no longer a street gang, right? And so when David Dawley finished his grant, he went back to Washington, D.C. to wrap up everything, turn in his research and all that stuff. And he moved back to Lawndale, right? He moved back to Lawndale to support them because he was a grant writer. He had relationships and resources and stuff. So that became a trio. Bobby Gore was the charisma, the voice. Alfonso Alfred, he was the chief that brought the body, you know, the numbers. And David Dawley was the grant writer and stuff. And they became that trio, and they started going after grants. And one of the grants they got to hire young vice lords, you know, my generation, to clean up their own neighborhood, right? And then they got a beautification grant where there was a lot of dirt in front of people, how they started growing grass. Then they opened up Teen Town. Teen Town was a restaurant right on the northwest corner, 16th and Lawndale. Then they opened up the African Lion. That was a boutique, because back then people were wearing dashikis and afros and stuff like that, and jewelry, African jewelry. Then they had 2 Tasty Freeze ice cream parlors. Then they had 2 House of Lords. The House of Lords was for my generation. We come after school, get tutoring and all that shit, and then we can play games and all that kind of stuff there. That's the only way you can get in there. You gotta, if you didn't have homework, a tutor sat out with you for 30 minutes before you were allowed to do it. So they had a lot of that going on, you know. And like I say, Sears and Roebuck was their initial fiscal agent